Good morning, Dawg Nation. I am Brandon Adams, and this is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans, presented today by Merriweather and Tharp. We are jam-packed, fully loaded, getting you ready a little bit today for Georgia UMass. We have not done a lot of that. We'll do some of that today. Terrence Edwards is going to help us with that. Always great to have Terrence as a part of our program. Also, we'll have a kind of a humorous look back on what I thought was a really entertaining ceremony yesterday involving the four-star edge rusher Chase Linton, allowing Georgia now to move up to the number one recruiting class in the country. We'll have some fun with that. And perhaps the most important thing on today's show, and I'm not leading off with this just because I feel like we did a lot of this yesterday, but a day after we played you a lot of clips yesterday of Kirby Smart kind of letting the committee, I don't want to say let him have it, but he really kind of, gave you some very pointed comments about the committee and his sort of feeling about the college football playoff selection process right now. I believe that yesterday, during what's called the SEC Weekly Coaches Teleconference, Kirby Smart gave his most forceful commentary yet. We'll have that on our show today, and I'll explain why this is a little bit of a prophecy fulfilled based on something I said almost a year ago. We'll do that as a part of the program. I'll also give you one quick programming note. So today, I get the privilege of going to visit with our friends from Lassiter Tractor. We're going to have a great lunch with them, one of our terrific sponsors. In order to get down there and be able to do this, I need to get on the road here. So we're going to wrap up a couple of minutes sooner than we normally do. If you're watching live on video, our good friend Cody Chafin's going to get you for the R.S. Andrews cool down. Cody does a great job, as always. He's really the architect behind a lot of the video stuff that you see on the screens, the stuff from the sidelines, and coming to what we call like B-roll here on our show. Cody always does a great job with that. So I know many of you have gotten to know Cody from On the Beat and some things like that. So today you'll get a chance to ask him your questions as part of the R.S. Andrews cool down. I know how happy you'll be for that because Cody, one of the really important members of our Dawg Nation team right now. So that is going to be a lot of fun for all of you here coming up in a moment. But for now, we got Georgia football to talk, and I'm glad to be doing it with you. It is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans, presented today by Merriweather and Tharp, and it begins right now.
Today's episode of DawgNation Daily is brought to you by Merriweather and Tharp, your source for Georgia divorce. Find them online at georgiadivorceteam.com.
Presented by DawgNation.com, this is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans. Here's your host, Brandon Adams.
One of the things I've been pretty consistent about over the years is I like recruiting theatrics. I like recruiting drama. I guess, sort of I don't know, I mentioned this yesterday. I'm a little bit hyperbolic sometimes. Y'all know I like wrestling, and we do all this, crazy stuff. I mean, I just am sort of into the show sometimes. It's one of those things that I don't have much of a problem with. I don't like a lot of drama on the other side of National Signing Day when it relates to players. At that point in time, it's probably time to sort of buckle up the chin strap and get down to business. But if you want to have a little fun with your recruiting process, we've never had a problem with that, whether it's a player that comes to Georgia, a player that goes somewhere else. We like live animals. We like video. We like multimedia. We like anything you want to do to kind of make the experience what you want it to be. We're sort of okay with that. So yesterday, we had a really fun moment, kind of old school in some respects, because if you think about it, there was a time in which, recruiting announcements were the way in which recruits kind of, sort of made their pledge. And at one point in time, there was the sort of cinematic style commitment videos. The truth is those are pretty expensive, so you don't see quite as many of the true cinematic style commitment videos as you once did, because they're just behind the scenes. That's not always a cheap thing to put together necessarily, so you don't see as much of that. But also we're kind of in the day and age where the really slick edits are kind of popular, and so now it's like so-and-so recruit just sort of drops their commitment with a Instagram post, as opposed to the kind of a little bit more of the old school hat show, like many of us sort of feel like we kind of grew up with. You don't quite have as much hat show, it seems like, anymore. Recruits are a little bit more, just sort of prone to just sort of drop this thing on Instagram or something like that. But yesterday, with the four-star edge rusher out of North Atlanta High School, Chase Linton, who thankfully chose Georgia, we got kind of an old school hat show commitment type deal, which I really enjoyed. As I mentioned on the video we did yesterday, there's also this thing where it seems like a little bit of a trend, and sometimes every class sort of has their own way of doing things. It seems like there's a little bit of a trend for this 2025 class where a lot of guys are sort of making their announcement without their parents necessarily knowing exactly what they're doing, which sort of sometimes adds at least a little bit to the drama on some of that kind of stuff. And so you had a situation where Chase Linton's up at the podium yesterday. His parents aren't really sure what he's doing. In fact, I want to show you some of this because it's really funny. We'll hear a little bit of Chase, and I'll kind of talk you through some of this. As he goes through his process of choosing Georgia, his parents are kind of
doing all that rigmarole stuff. I'm not one of those guys. We just gonna hurry up and get this out the way.
a little bit of a swerve here. He says we're going to hurry up and get this out of the way. Puts the hat on. It's the Rutgers hat. He really kind of sells it. Nice big smile. His parents have no idea what's going on. They're part of the show. Takes the hat off. Now unzips the jacket. It's that heinous Georgia Tech t-shirt that doesn't really look good on anybody, we would say. Now here comes the Georgia Tech hat being put on. Dad trying to play along like he's happy. Mama not quite so sure. She puts the phone there up on that.
It's a little tight.
Chase Linton says the hat is a little tight, pulls off the Tech shirt, and now it's the Georgia shirt being revealed to the happiness of everybody. There at North Atlanta High School, you even hear the barking, and, of course, the black Georgia hat goes on with the red Georgia shirt, and I think it's really fun. I mean, Chase Linton is a really entertaining personality, really good football player, ranked as high as, 45th in the country in the individual player rankings from 24/7 Sports. I did not know his personality was as good as it was yesterday. And listen, we're only a few days away from one of the bigger Georgia Tech games in recent memory. Playing the thing on Black Friday night. You know, Tech's won some games. Tech is now trying in recruiting, something they haven't done for most of the last 20 years. So there's a little bit more juice to Georgia versus Georgia Tech than there was for, frankly, most of our lifetimes here. A little bit more juice to this game. So a little bit of a shot fired with a recruitment deal of, hey, I'm going to put the Tech stuff on, then I'm going to take it off and reveal the Georgia stuff. I kind of got no problem with that. I think that's pretty fun. I think that Chase Linton, this is one of those deals, if you really want to kind of carry something like this out, you have to have a pretty good personality to sell it. I think that Chase yesterday sold that pretty well. Pretty entertaining guy overall, and the fact that his parents are trying to, follow him through all of this, seemingly not very sure of what he was going to do, I think made the show only more entertaining. Then after it was over with, Chase told our Jeff Sentell what it was about Georgia that he liked, and frankly, I thought this was pretty funny too.
It's a lot closer than Rutgers in Jersey. That's big for me. I want to see my grandma while I can, and, that big family aspect. But I wasn't too locked in until that official visit. That halftime snack, oh my God. It was so good. There was wings. They had cheesecake platter. There was the Skittles candy. It was like, oh, you know what? This might be the place for me. They had a whole table. The chef, it really wasn't fancy, but they fancied it up. They took the barbecue sauce. They were looking at me, I was shaking it up. I was like, yeah, that's classy.
Funny guy. And listen, if I was a player like him, I'm guessing I'd probably be won over by the halftime spread there too, especially on an official visit. I think that Georgia does a good job with that. They build that West End Zone lounge for reasons like this to make recruits feel like they're having a good time, taking care of you with some good food. I think that's probably a pretty good thing for Georgia to do. And the fact that Chase kind of has a good time with the way that he was treated at UGA, I think that's pretty good as well. Now, on the serious sort of football part of this, Georgia moves up to the #1 ranking again in a couple of the major national websites after this, which is exactly where Georgia wants to be. And it's kind of funny. We're obviously watching Georgia on the field right now, try to maintain its status as a national championship level program. The kind of talent that you bring in on a year-to-year basis, that's a leading indicator of what your future on the field is going to look like. And, we saw Georgia last year out-recruit everybody else in the country. Right now, through this cycle, it seems like they're well poised to do the same thing again. And so I think you take a lot of comfort in that. And one of the things we always kind of circle back to on such stories like this is I think some fans in some respects have just gotten really comfortable and sort of used to the idea of Georgia having the best recruiting classes, and it probably doesn't hit you the same way it did in the early days of our program going back 8-9 years ago. Back then, recruiting wins were all a lot more celebrated. Perhaps individually they are right now. That's, maybe to a certain extent human nature. But don't lose sight of this. Don't take for granted the fact that Georgia is continuing to stockpile high school talent, guys that you have a chance to keep for 2, 3, 4 years in some cases. No one is still doing a better job of that than Georgia is. This 2025 class, another example of that, and Chase Linton, the latest example from 2025. So go back and watch the full video if you missed some of that yesterday. I thought really fun, entertaining stuff from Chase Linton. Now, with that said, we'll kind of shift gears slightly, although not completely. As we say before, Georgia brings in these elite high school players every single year, and that's always really good because it is the lifeblood of your program. Everybody knows that. Everybody understands that. Here is the other thing we also know and understand. The process for how you go from being, boy, everybody's All-American, the elite high school recruit, to the capable and contributing player in college, that is oftentimes not a path that can be traveled without some bumps and some whines and some detours perhaps along the way. That is a tough task to go from high school star to contributing player here at a place like Georgia. And in the early days for a freshman, sometimes there's a lot to be learned. You have to grow physically. You have to kind of mature emotionally. You just have to get used to the college grind. And this year, Georgia's no different than any other, where a lot of these young guys are sort of trying to figure all that out. And on Saturday, perhaps we saw, somebody kind of step to the forefront on this, the wide receiver Nitro Tuggle, and he got a chance to do what a lot of these other young players are hoping to do more of as this season goes on. Get on the field, get some playing time, extended playing time, really kind of be part of the story for Georgia on Saturday. And obviously, when you think about what UMass is this week, this is for the first time in a while, Georgia kind of stepping outside of these really intense competitive games. Georgia's more than a 40-point favorite against UMass on Saturday. If Kirby was sitting here right now, he would say what he's already said this week is you don't take any of this for granted. You certainly can't assume that you're going to build the big lead and get a chance to get these players in the game because sometimes games don't quite go the way you think they're going to. And you don't really approach it from the beginning of the game with the idea of, we're going to put on our foot on the gas here at the beginning so we make more room for guys at the end. That's just not the right, appropriate way to approach a football game. Just not the way that you do it. But we also know as well that maybe it could be a little bit of a chance for more guys to finally get that playing time they've been craving all year long. In fact, in light of all that, let me let you hear Kirby Smart. This goes back to Saturday night. I thought he did a really good job of talking about this, about how it is the guy like Nitro Tuggle emerges and what you have to do to get that playing time, and why maybe that's a little bit of a template for what other guys have been doing this week, maybe have been doing all season long, with a chance to also put that on display finally against the kind of game where Georgia can kind of enhance some of its depth and get some young players a little bit more playing time. This is Kirby Smart on that topic going back to Saturday night.
That they're resilient as hell, and no matter who, next man up mentality. And the kids in our room that haven't played yet, and sometimes they want to pout, they need to realize that you don't know when your time's coming. Will you work while you wait, is what we say. Will you work while you wait? And Chauncey Bowens worked while he waited, and it paid off for him. Nate, Nitro, he had a great week of practice. So we need more of that.
So, listen, we talk all the time about how much of a grind the college football season can be. There's a lot of work that goes on. And when you are working and waiting at the same time, that's hard. It just is. And, Kirby's acknowledged, hey, maybe this year because of the nature of the schedule and what Georgia's being asked to do, maybe some of these young guys haven't played as much this year as they perhaps have in the past. Once again, a chance for that to change on Saturday. And it's one of the reasons why we love these home games. Last week it's the big environment for the big top 10 ranked opponent. This week the atmosphere perhaps a little bit different, but it's still maybe a chance for some guys to have a feel-good moment. To, as Kirby said, more for Chauncey Bowens, or maybe even more for like a guy like Ellis Robinson, who's been, kind of waiting, but also working while he's waiting. Or some of these young linebackers. And we've seen some of Chris Cole. Maybe it's more of Justin Williams. Maybe it's more of a guy like Zakovi White. Some of these guys that get their chance to play and really kind of show you, what they're all about and what they've been doing while they've been waiting for their time to come out and play. You can't certainly guarantee that against an opponent like UMass, but also on a show like this, it's okay for us to be candid and say that's probably what should happen. Georgia probably should have a big lead in the second half at some point in time on Saturday. And guys like Chris Cole can get involved and be a part of this. A running back like Chauncey Bowens can be involved and get a part of this. And these guys can kind of have that feel-good moment so they can show themselves playing and get those photos and get those memories and create that opportunity to say, listen, I know this year has sort of seen me kind of battling for a while, trying to get on the field, trying to make a contribution, but against a team like UMass, I finally got my chance to do that. And the experience I gained there gives me a chance to be set up for success in future seasons here at UGA. And it could be an example of another one of these highly rated elite recruiting classes, building a foundation for even more success for the Dogs in the years to come. My name's Brandon Adams, and this is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans, presented today by Merriweather and Tharp. We're glad you're with us, no matter how you get to us, video, radio, podcast. Just so thankful that you're here. We appreciate our friends at Merriweather and Tharp who make it all possible for you there, too. Your source for Georgia divorce. That is what Merriweather and Tharp is. And listen, here is an unavoidable reality to life, that when you look at the overall statistics in an audience the size of ours, it is just a fact that a number of you, thousands upon thousands of you, unfortunately, have either considered the divorce process, perhaps you may be going through a divorce right now, or you're certainly fearful that one could be on the horizon for you. And maybe you've done everything you can do to try to prevent that from happening, but this is just a thing that's going to occur. This is just the hand that you've been dealt, and in some cases, this is through no fault of your own. And obviously, what a terrible thing that is, and now you're trying to make sense of all of that. And in the midst of this, you're trying to make sense of the divorce process itself. Well, here's what I want you to know. If you've got questions about the divorce process, our friends at Merriweather and Tharp have answers for you. I want you to find them online, GeorgiaDivorceTeam.com. That's GeorgiaDivorceTeam.com. And you can get in touch with Merriweather and Tharp. You can talk to one of their attorneys. You get a free initial consultation, and you can find out how they can kind of walk with you through this divorce process. Also, one of the biggest questions folks have is the cost certainty around what the divorce process is going to be like from a standpoint like that. How much is this going to cost me? Merriweather and Tharp's got a lot of really creative ways for you to get the cost certainty you seek in terms of getting to the other side of this, getting it done, getting on to the next phase of your life, and doing so in sort of a cost-efficient manner. Merriweather and Tharp can tell you some really clever things they've done to kind of make that a little bit easier for folks, too. All kinds of options and plans you can choose from, including the model M&T level of service. So I want you to check them out online, GeorgiaDivorceTeam.com. That's the website, GeorgiaDivorceTeam.com. Merriweather and Tharp is your source for Georgia divorce. All right, quick programming note for those of you watching live on video. You always do our R.S. Andrews cool down at the conclusion of a day's show. Today, live on video, and if you're a podcast listener or something like that, that's not going to impact you. But today, live on video, I'm going to step away here. I get a chance to go meet with our folks at Lassiter Tractor today. I'm really excited about that. And so that's going to cause me to have to get on the road here and get on down there so I can see them. So we're going to step away here a little early for me anyway. And our buddy Cody Chaffins, who's producing today, is going to step in, and he's going to run the R.S. Andrews cool down for us today. And I'm really excited about having Cody with all of you. I know how much you guys like him, and obviously see him every Monday as part of On the Beat with Mike Griffith, and so you can see him here on our show today. It's also Terrence Edwards here coming up in just a moment, too. But prior to that, I want to go around the doghouse here today. Now, I want to go back in time here for a moment, and this is maybe going to come across a little self-serving. I don't mean for it to, but I do think it's important to note that we have been predicting something for a very long time that is obviously coming true right now. A year ago, when Georgia was left out of the final year of the 14 college football playoff after having lost Alabama, we were very forceful in our argument that Georgia should have been included in that playoff, even though they lost one game by 3 points to Alabama in an SEC championship. We didn't believe that was enough to exclude UGA from the playoff. There were some Georgia fans who thought we were arguing too strongly for that we should somehow bend the knee because Georgia lost and basically just sort of accept the system as it was. We simply didn't agree with that. We thought that Georgia had the compelling case and that they should not be excluded from that playoff on the basis of the kind of game that essentially nobody else in the country is being asked to play. I think we were right then. I think history has proven we're still right now on that topic. But there was also something that I said around all of that. It's almost exactly a year ago. This was the Monday after the SEC championship, the clip I'm about to play for you. But it's also kind of symbolic of what we were saying a lot around then, which is that sometimes arguing is a little distasteful. Sometimes it's the kind of thing that people just don't really want to do. They like the idea of it being settled neat and tidy on the field, but college football has essentially never functioned that way. And that as we transitioned, as we were a year ago, from the 4-team playoff to the 12-team playoff, that getting ready for a little bit more of a combative relationship between Georgia and the rest of the SEC or the SEC and the other leagues or the sport overall, kind of getting ready for that was sort of an important thing to do. let me give you a reminder of what I was saying almost exactly a year ago, like 50 weeks ago in total here, almost exactly a year ago, and see if you don't join me in saying that's exactly what the world does look like right now. This is me from December. I believe that Georgia fans should have been a lot more comfortable with the idea of still arguing for their team to make the playoff, whether Georgia was ever going to make it or not, because that's what college football is about to be. That in the future, moving forward, it's going to be about arguing. It's not going to be who's number 4 because it's going to be about 12 teams, but there will still be an argument about who gets into the 12-team playoff. There will also be an argument about, of those teams, who gets a chance to host a playoff game, who has to go on the road, who gets a chance to have one of the, sort of top 4 spots and gets that bye. But that's what it's about to be. And I think there are a lot of people wondering, well, what people think about us if we try to make that argument. Who cares? The name of the game is winning. And if you can win on the field, you win on the field. And if you can't win on the field, then you need to try to win the argument. If you're a little bit, squeamish about, gosh, what are people going to think if people just make whatever argument suits them best, then you're not ready for what's coming next, because there is going to be a lot more arguing to come. So as I watch that clip, one of the things that does jump out to me is that's back in the days when Eddie was still on our desk. I do have an update for you on Eddie at the end of today's show. So good news perhaps coming on that. But on the topic of, as I said, listen, on the heels of the SEC championship, what you saw, me doing on this show, I know Josh Brooks was pretty forceful. The Georgia athletic director, Greg Sankey, the SEC commissioner, was arguing on Georgia's behalf. There was a lot of argument that, listen, you cannot leave Georgia out of this playoff. I don't care if Texas won the Big 12. They're leaving the Big 12. I don't care if Washington won the Pac-12. The Pac-12 no longer exists. I don't care about Florida State. They already have told you they think their league is deficient. I don't care about anything. Georgia should not be left out of this playoff. And we said that's the argument we made right now. In the future, there's going to be even more arguing going on between who gets in the playoff, who hosts a home playoff game, who gets one of the byes to the quarterfinal. And would we not all agree that's exactly what the world looks like right now? That on all of those fronts, you have all of those arguments. As I said yesterday, who knows how much of this will actually work out in Georgia's favor, whether or not Georgia will win the arguments that it's making. Obviously, the powers that be are going to do what they do. But I do appreciate the fact that this year, I would say, far more forcefully than a year ago, Kirby Smart is arguing on his team's behalf. And he's not doing it in a, less than classy way. He's not taking cheap shots. He's not whining. He's not losing focus from the main task at hand. He's just pointing out facts. And there is there's nothing wrong with that, because the truth is an absolute defense. And we played you some clips really the last couple of days of Smart kind of getting into all of that. But yesterday on the SEC coaches teleconference, I thought Kirby may have made his most forceful statement yet about the problem he has with the College Football Playoff Selection Committee. Now, I wasn't on this call. I don't have the audio or anything like that from you. I read the quote on 3, although anybody that was on the call got it, but I'm going to show you here from on3.com. I want to read this to you from Kirby and see if you don't join me in saying that Kirby Smart's going to join the fight here now. Kirby Smart is in on what I predicted a year ago, the big argument that's coming and the intensity of those debates as everybody sort of fights for what's in their own self-interest here. So this is Kirby from yesterday, SEC coaches teleconference. I'm going to read the quote. Kirby says, "I think it's more than your non-conference games and who you play. It just seems unjust to me." What a strong word that is to use. Kirby calls the committee and their thought process here unjust. He says, "It seems unjust to me when you evaluate somebody that's got a third-ranked defense or somebody that's got a fifth-ranked defense. Well, don't you think their defense is dictated by who they played on offense?" And that's not a rhetorical question, by the way. Of course, Smart's right about that your defense will look better if you're playing weak offenses, the likes of which some of these teams are playing. Kirby goes on to ask, how many top offenses have these teams played that are ranked so highly by the committee? Kirby says, because last time I checked, our offense and our defense have played the top offenses and defenses across the country. You're not going to be ranked as high if you play top ones that if you played lower ranked ones. And that's what gets me. He goes on to say, they talk about the eye test. How do you play in the game? Well, how do you play in the game is going to be dictated by where you're playing, home or away, and who you're playing. That's the two number one indicators of how you play. It's who you're playing, who you line up across from that matters. But point differential, I don't believe they look at just that. I don't know if that's actually the case. They're looking at the whole picture of how you play, and that's dictated by who you play. So Kirby Smart, very, very forceful, very, very consistently kind of pointing out that strength of schedule has got to matter. Now, some of this, if it does become more a part of the ongoing conversation, won't just benefit Georgia, because the truth is right now, I think a lot of the SEC is being harmed here. Georgia's the team that's probably the most penalized because they're kind of the bottom of the teams currently in the playoff, at least based on last week's ranking. But when Smart continually kind of beats the drum for strength of schedule needs to matter, strength of schedule needs to matter, strength of schedule needs to matter, I think he is setting a precedent that makes the entire sport better in the future, because all of a sudden now you can't just protect an easy record by avoiding tough games, which obviously hurts all of our enjoyment of college football if none of these top teams want to play each other anymore, because a loss is going to get you punished by the committee in the way that an easy win against a meaningless opponent is not. So the argument that Smart's making benefits Georgia right now, but I believe it has a tendency to sort of benefit the sport overall, and I'm glad to see him making it. Because as we said yesterday, if you want to exist and thrive in the world in which we currently live in from a college football standpoint, you got to be comfortable arguing. You've got to argue on your own behalf, because these leagues, like say the Big Ten or whatever else, they're not your allies working collectively with you to make the sport better. They're trying to take something from you. And if you let them, then it's your own fault. You have got to see this for what it is, a zero-sum game where everyone is fighting for their unequal share of the pie here. And right now, the Big Ten seems to be getting away with it in a way that we would say is probably unfair. But the SEC seems to want to do something about that. Winning these games on the field, obviously, a big part of that. But pointing out the error of the ways of the people who've been empowered to make that decisions, we think that's a part of that too. And good job by Kirby Smart for saying what he said there yesterday. And honestly, kind of showing you that we had predicted this a year ago, and it is working out exactly that way here right now. And that is Around the Doghouse here today on DawgNation Daily, presented by Merriweather and Tharp. We're going to get Terrence Edwards here coming up in just a moment. While we're waiting for Terrence, well, by the way, we'll talk to Terrence about some of this stuff here today. While we're waiting on Terrence, though, and getting this rocking and rolling, let me give you a quick shout out to our friends at Cercheros here, too, because as you're getting ready for another big game day in Athens, many of you going to the UMass game, some of you staying at home to watch it on TV, you're getting friends and family together for something like that. Obviously, you know, everybody got to eat. Everybody needs that delicious meal. Well, getting a party like this catered, or a tailgate like this catered from our friends at Cercheros, a great way to do that, especially if you've got kind of like a bigger crowd, 10 or more people. For a home watch party or anything like that, Cercheros has got you covered. Also, great way for you to get this. They got convenient options all across our state here right now. 30 locations throughout the state of Georgia, including right there in Athens. They'll give you online ordering, pickup. You can also do delivery in some cases. They're going to bring that fresh mix right to you with made-to-order bowls, burritos, quesadillas, nachos, and a whole lot more. 25 fresh toppings. By the way, if you go in store and you're getting your meal, you can actually get those toppings kind of grilled fresh for you. So you don't want like the excessively cold vegetables kind of making your protein cold or something like that. You can get that all grilled up for you and get, cooked hot and fresh right there while you're there. It's just one of the things they do to make their mix as fresh as any you're going to get anywhere else, the fresh mix of Cercheros. We're big fans of all of that, and we love the way in which they're now growing locations, coming to even new spots here in the months to come. So find out more online. It's Cercheros.com. That's Surcheros, Cercheros.com for a lot more on that. Okay, so before we're done today, we're going to look at a lot of the other things going on around the world of the SEC and college football here right now. A little bit of a warning going out there for Texas. We'll talk about that. We'll also talk about perhaps a little bit of confidence starting to grow in one of Georgia's kind of competitors here for the national championship. We'll cover that ground on today's show. But for now, on everything, including what's next for Georgia in a very contentious battle for the spots in the college football playoff, let's talk about that right now with Terrence Edwards here today on DawgNation Daily, presented by Merriweather and Tharp.
From Athens and across the SEC or wherever the recruiting trail may lead, here's a DawgNation.com insider.
Always glad to have Terrence Edwards here on our program here today. Terrence always brings a lot to the table. And Terrence, there's a Georgia receiver in particular I want to talk to you about in a moment. But prior to that, we were just talking about what seems like right now a pretty combative discussion around the college football playoff, where Georgia, at least based on this past week's ratings, currently in the field, but not hosting a home playoff game. And in the eyes of some, I guess myself included, probably not getting enough credit for the best schedule in the country, the toughest schedule in the country overall. So let me ask you, do you think this committee right now, we may have lost, we got Terrence back up. Do you think right now, Terrence, this playoff selection committee is treating Georgia fairly with where it's ranked and the fact that it'd have to be going on the road right now and maybe not getting a lot of credit for its strength of schedule right now? You think this committee's being fair to Georgia at the moment?
I don't think so. I think the strength of schedule should matter because if we just went and scheduled cupcakes the whole season and strength of schedule is not that great, then we would probably be in the 1 or 2 spot. But the SEC, with having so many top teams, you're going to have to play top teams each Saturday, and that's what Georgia has done. They've went on to road to Texas. That should matter. Losing on the road Alabama, that should matter. Losing on the road to Ole Miss, that should matter. Even though you lost, you have to go on the road and play these teams in a hostile environment. And Kirby says it all the time, and I echo his sentiments because I've had to play in these stadiums. It is hard each week going into these environments and winning. Yeah. So I think having those games played at the opponent stadium and not home, that should matter. Just look at some of the teams that are ahead of us. They're in the 60 and 70 and even 100 percentile of schedule strength. So beating some of these teams that are beating should matter to me.
No, I think that's exactly right. And on the other side of that, I would say, and not everybody loves to hear this, but when it comes to an Indiana or a Penn State and even a Texas here in the SEC, when you really haven't beaten anyone of note, I cannot be sure how good you are. And I am going to be skeptical of a committee that sort of treats those teams as the equal to Georgia, or in some cases even superior to Georgia, when they just haven't done what Georgia's done. And frankly, they haven't really done what, say, Ole Miss and Alabama have done, two teams that I also think have at least played a little bit more in the way of, true competitive games and do have at least the substantial win in the case that both Bama and Ole Miss beat Georgia. In Alabama's case, I think they've done even more than Ole Miss has. But the point here is that if you haven't really beaten anybody, I can't be sure of how good you are. I don't care about your analytics rankings or all that kind of stuff, your efficiency numbers. I really don't care that much about that. I need to see you do it against quality competition. And frankly, I'm really glad that Kirby is being as outspoken about that as he is right now, because I don't just think that benefits Georgia. I think it benefits the sport overall to say the name of the game still has to be earning credibility in the kind of exciting games that fans want to watch.
Yes, it's going to be I'm going to wait to see, because Indiana do have the opportunity to shut all of us up this weekend with them playing Ohio State. And I'm just waiting to see how they look in that game. But if you haven't played or beaten any team in the top 25, how for sure can we be that you are one of the top teams in the country? So they're going to get their opportunity this week to show that they belong. But again, when you play the likes of the Georgias or the Alabamas, you have to play the Ohio States of the world every week, not just once. So that's where I tend to lie if, the strength of schedule matters.
I want to ask you about UMass here for a moment, because I think the expectation for a lot of Georgia fans is, Georgia's a 42-point favorite, whatever, that you build the big lead, you get some young players in. Georgia did some of that last week against Tennessee just because of necessity, but on Saturday, a chance to see more of like the Ellis Robinsons or the Justin Williams or, a little bit more of Chauncey Bowen, some, Scovie White maybe. How much do you view this game for Georgia on Saturday as that chance to maybe get some much-needed rest, but also get some valuable experience for players this year because of the nature of the schedule that Georgia's been playing that just haven't quite gotten that yet?
Yes, what I'm about to say, I don't want to disrespect UMass like they're not a college football team, but I just think it's a lot of cleaning up to do, a lot of things that we haven't done well. Let's go out and compete against another Division I football team and try to get ourselves better. And some of the things that we have probably struggled in, let's go out and try to use this game as about us and not about UMass. And I'm not saying that in kind of disrespectful way to UMass. So let's go out and play clean football. That's what I'm looking for. Can we go out and play clean football? And if we go out and do our job, then that would allow some of these young guys to get some valuable reps. I would love to see Carson go out there and hit some deep balls and just play a clean half of football, and maybe we could get Garner in to get some valuable experience as well. So that's what I'm looking for, just going out to play clean football.
So I know you were productive throughout your entire Georgia career. I will admit, though, that my mind kind of, I don't know, I guess my memory's fading a little bit. Go back to like your first year at Georgia when you're kind of just first getting out there. You know, how much did you have games like this circled to either, you know, get more playing time than you were getting or kind of get the bigger stats? And, you know, I mean, it just seems like it'd be human nature for me that if you're a player kind of coming into your own here at Georgia, especially if you haven't got as many touches as you want, or in the case of some players, as much playing time as you want, this is the sort of game that you'd have circled, right? Maybe from your own career, you have an example of that?
Yeah, BA, my very first game I started, I went 10 catches for 196 yards and 2 touchdowns. So, I did start from day one. So I was just looking to play at that time, just becoming a new receiver. Never played the receiver position before. You know, my every game to me was going out there just trying to learn and get better. But yes, the very first game against Utah State, I went out there for 10 catches, 196 yards, and 2 touchdowns.
What do you think helped you do that so quickly? I mean, was it your brother, the fact that you grew up kind of competing against a guy who was also, you know, an NFL level player, and so therefore you sort of had to be good, otherwise he's going to, you know, brutalize you? Or, I mean, like, why do you think you were kind of like physically, emotionally, spiritually mature enough to be such an effective player, just essentially from the word go with your Georgia career?
It was my football IQ, just knowing how to play. I never played the wide receiver position before until I got to Georgia. So I'm going out there on really not knowing a lot about the position. I played quarterback in high school, so that kind of gave me an understanding of the game of football. And I just went out there on natural talent, not knowing what I was doing, to be honest with you. I really didn't understand the position until really when Coach Rick became the head coach, when I really got the teaching and the coaching from that position. I was out there just playing on near talent and knowledge of the game.
That's really fun. A guy that got a chance to get some extended playing time on Saturday and seemed to look pretty good while he was doing it was Nitro Tuggle. You know, nice routes, you know, a guy that's got a clear level of athleticism. And, you know, Georgia needs all the help from the receiver position they can get. What did you notice from Nitro when he was in the game, and what kind of help do you think that he could give Georgia now moving forward?
Yes, there are a few plays that I did notice that he was out there. He had a nice release on Tennessee's best defensive back, where the ball kind of sailed out of bounds, and he had a slant that he caught and almost got us a first down. Essentially did get us first down with the face mask call. So it was good to see him out there early, not when the game was out of reach. He got in when it mattered. So these are variable reps for him right now. So I'm looking to see how he progress against UMass and then against Tech. But I loved his skill set coming out of high school. So I'm happy to see that he did get an opportunity to showcase his skill set.
Yeah, I don't know how many people are comparing Nitro Tuggle to, like, say, Ladd McConkey. But one of the things that I always notice about Ladd, and I am not a football expert in this way, the way that you would be, but one of the things I always notice is, especially even now in his like rookie season in the NFL, Ladd is really good at sort of running himself open, like the way that he runs his routes. He just sort of shakes the defender by, you know, his footwork and kind of, you know, where he chooses to place his body. I thought there was some of that from Nitro on Saturday where he just sort of, like you said, you know, his release or whatever, he kind of used his body and used the way in which he was running the route to sort of create for himself the opportunity to catch the football. And it's easy to imagine there could be plenty of catches that result in that. The fact that he just sort of seemed to, in a couple of instances anyway, kind of run himself open a little bit.
It's just the art of route running, and Ladd was one of the best at being able to run double moves, being able to just run corner post corners, comeback routes. So I think Nigel have that skill set and he's very similar in his being able to run routes, and it gives me A.D. Mitchell vibes. It very has a wiggle about him once he catches the football. Probably not as tall as A.D., but in the same mold of A.D. Mitchell. And I'm just excited to see his future and how he continues to progress at it while he's at the University of Georgia.
Let me ask you one more thing about the passing attack from Saturday. Oscar Delp has 2 touchdowns. Ben Jurasik is probably a bigger part of the offense now than he's been maybe at any point here. Obviously, Lawson Lucky continues to do really good things and be a valuable presence on the field. Do you think what we saw from Georgia from the tight ends on Saturday, is that kind of what it will be going forward? Because a lot of Georgia fans are very comfortable with the idea of, especially in the post-Brock Bowers world, of tight ends being a big part of this offense. They enjoyed seeing that on Saturday. Do you expect we'll see more of that as the season progresses?
I just think that's where we thrive once we get those tight ends involved, guys that really can control the middle of the football field. And we saw that this past Saturday, and it was good to get back to being able to showcase those guys' skill set. I think when we get those guys involved in the game plan, it makes it easier for the outside receivers to get open or play one-on-one against corners and nickels. So I'm excited for those guys. I've always, trained Oscar, trained Lawson. And I think we have a group of tight ends that's coming in the next wave is just going to continue that tradition as well.
Well, a lot of those guys you have worked with throughout the years, you're working with them now, and you'll be working with guys like that in the future. And for people who want to be a part of that work, we're kind of moving in on that winter time. That bubble work, I'm sure will be getting going here very soon. So, Terrence, for people who want to connect with you on the Terrence Edwards Wide Receiver Academy and learn how to catch the football better, how can they do that?
Yes, you can find me on all social media platforms at Terrence Edwards Wide Receiver Academy.
Terrence, thanks for your time. I really appreciate that. Love your thoughts on the Dawgs. I hope you enjoy the weekend. We'll look forward to talking to you soon.
Thank you.
Let's take a look around the rest of the league. This is SEC 3.
Yeah, I love how, granular Terrence gets when he looks at the receiver position. Obviously, his whole life has been devoted to that, and as he says, he was a very good player, kind of from the word go here at Georgia. Played professionally, now coaching, and that's just his craft. Same way that, somebody's what is it called? Cobbler. Somebody makes a shoe. If you're a cobbler, you know everything there is to be known about, making shoes. Well, Terrence's his craft is the receiver position. You know all about the routes and all about what you do. Give yourself a chance, get those hands on the football, and not let go. Terrence, very, very good at that. All right, we're going to get ready to go cruising around the SEC, courtesy of Royal Caribbean. And I guess if I had a craft, maybe my craft is taking Royal Caribbean cruises. Maybe I know as much about that as Terrence does, the wide receiver position or something like that. Hopefully I'm really good at convincing you to take a Royal Caribbean cruise vacation here as we head towards 2025. And if I'm not, I'll tell you who will be even better than me. That's our friend Jessica Slater. You can give her a call, 770-718-9147. That's 770-718-9147. You can also email her, jslater@dreamvacations.com. Now, look at this video we're showing today. This is really interesting. So one of the things that Royal Caribbean has, and you just saw that, the idea of one of these solarium suites. And, it's really cool. And this is not for everybody. Some people just want the regular stateroom, which I totally get. But one of the things that you do have on board the Royal Caribbean cruise ship is that if you want to kind of upgrade the experience with a suite, you want more space. And on the new ships, Royal Caribbean has special decks sort of situated for the suite holders, things like that. If you want your own experience that's really kind of an upgrade from just the regular run-of-the-mill experience, these really cool suites give you a chance to do that. And one of the things I've been lucky enough to do, I've never stayed in one, but I have toured them before. A lot of times they'll invite me to go on these, inaugural sailings and things like that. And so you get a chance to see some of these suites. I'm always really amazed by them. They also have junior suites, things like that too, or different categories of suites. It'll get you access to the suite lounge and the fun stuff that goes with that. So if you want that kind of experience, Jessica can kind of walk you through your options, because when it comes to a Royal Caribbean cruise vacation, it's not just the port you sail out of or the destinations you visit. It's also the options and the amenities that are best for you while you're on board. And she can tell you all about that. Okay. So a couple of things for you here today as we're cruising around the SEC, courtesy of Royal Caribbean. Do you know who Dave Portnoy is from Barstool Sports? So Dave, obviously a pretty well-known sports gambler. His whole brand, I would say, in some form or fashion, sort of built around that. So there were some headlines this week because Portnoy has bet $100,000 on Alabama, and I guess about 10-1 or so, win this year's national championship. He'd get paid more than $1 million if this does pay out. Now, listen, the sports books themselves always like to kind of hype the big bettors, making big bets. These are not typically based on like extra information, because if it was, the sports books would not be telling you about them. Sports books are not going to tell you anything that's helpful for you when it comes to winning bets. So anything they hype, you can sort of assume is probably not helpful. However, we did say this, that pains us to admit, obviously, we're not Bama people around here, and I don't know that anybody's got more than a slight edge when it comes to the national championship. But I do think Alabama, as of late, has been playing a pretty good brand of football. I think it's interesting. On Saturday, they go to Oklahoma. And we're talking a lot about, who could be upset, who could be in trouble before the end of the year. I kind of wonder if Bama, because it's kind of blown out of LSU, that game doesn't mean as much anymore. But it's won convincingly versus Missouri. They're still in the rankings, perhaps to aid Alabama's case, the more conspiratorially minded might say. They obviously beat Georgia. That still really matters. You kind of wonder, is Bama playing well enough right now that they're impervious to the sort of late season upset, whether it be Oklahoma on Saturday or Iron Bowl to finish the season? And we've seen Auburn surprisingly play well against Alabama in years before, even during the Nick Saban era. Sometimes that happened. You wonder what Kalen DeBoer is sort of dealing with there too. But, in a roundabout way, I don't disagree with Portnoy that if you look at the overall landscape here, take Georgia out of it for a moment, if you're looking at a non-Georgia team who could win it, I think the case for Alabama, because of Jalen Milroe and his experience, because of what they can do offensively, because DeBoer was in the playoff last year with a different team, I think the case for Bama is about as strong as it is for anybody else. I really do. Now, here's where you bring this back to Georgia for a moment. This is one of the things, if you're a Georgia fan, you can't lose sight of. We are obsessed with Georgia. That means we're obsessed with Georgia's good stuff, but we're also obsessed with their blemishes too. A lot of Georgia fans, I think, have gotten, if you zoom in too close on something with like a microscope, you can't tell what it is. I think that some Georgia fans are so zoomed in on Georgia, looking at all the blemishes as close and magnified a way as possible. I think they've got a distorted vision what the actual truth is. That if you do have people, whether it be me just sort of suggesting, or a guy like, is it El Presidente, is that his nickname, that's putting $100,000 down on it. If Bama is sort of thought to be kind of a trendy pick to win the national championship, well, you saw Georgia against Alabama. Georgia didn't win that game, but it certainly could have. So if the team that might be slightly favored in the eyes of some to win this year's national championship, if that's a team that we know for sure that Georgia could go head-to-head with and could beat, then Georgia is still a part of this national championship. We had the trophy on this show a week ago. And our reason for doing that with our friends at Dr. Pepper was because we just wanted to send the message. This was prior to the Tennessee game, by the way, that don't count Georgia out for the national championship. This isn't go for 2 in 22. We're not guaranteeing anything right now, but we are guaranteeing you that if you count Georgia out, you might look foolish before the season's all said and done. I saw where Urban Meyer was like, hey, in the future, maybe the SEC, the Big Ten, then maybe they'll just break off and go do their own thing. I got to tell you, I am so allergic to all of this SEC, Big Ten banding together right now. As I kind of said earlier in the show, right now I don't view the Big Ten as my ally. I view the Big Ten as my enemy. Because right now they're occupying 4 of the top 5 spots in the college football playoff selection committee top 25 when they clearly have not earned that. Oregon and Ohio State, I actually don't have much of a problem with. And I told you that yesterday. Indiana and Penn State, I, with all confidence, will call absolute frauds based on what they've done right now. So if I'm the SEC, why would I partner with them with anything? And frankly, part of the reason we've been a little bit critical of Greg Sankey as of late is I think he's played too nice with a league that has always sort of secretly viewed a little bit of an adversarial relationship with the SEC, whether it be serious stuff like in 2020 when the Big Ten was trying to cancel the season, or less, serious stuff like the so-called alliance a couple of years ago where they were partnering with the Big 12 and the Pac-12, whatever other league. That the Big Ten was against the SEC right up until the moment it sort of benefited them to partner together. And the SEC ought to be very, very suspicious of the Big Ten. Just should be. So you got guys like Meyer, and a lot of people say this right now, hey, maybe these leagues will sort of partner up and get together. Maybe they'll do all this together. Not me. That's not my ally. That's my enemy. And I hope that Greg Sankey realizes that too. One more thing here. I saw where Greg McElroy gave a little bit of a warning to Texas. This was on McElroy's podcast. Be careful if you lose that game at Texas A&M. I think that McElroy's probably right about that. I do. And by the way, McElroy on whatever the show Tuesday was, when maybe this is just my own like sort of tinfoil hat showing, But when they put Illinois in the rankings at the bottom, the truth is I don't have a huge issue with Illinois being ranked. But when they put him in, McElroy jumped on TV to say, "Well, there you go. That's the that's the ranking that benefits Penn State because that gets to be Penn State's best win." Whether I don't have a huge problem with Illinois being ranked. I just think it's funny that McElroy jumped right to that on TV. It's weird for me to say this because he is an former Alabama player. I think McElroy's probably the best analyst right now. I think he's probably the best analyst working, I think, especially now that our guy David Pollack is not really on the main networks anymore. I think that McElroy probably needs to be sort of ascended to the sort of top anchor status. It may be time for Kirk Herbstreit to take a step back and let a guy like McElroy step up. But he was also in his show talking about how, listen, if you're Texas, if you lose this game to Texas A&M, get used to the idea that you might miss the college football playoff, and you probably should. I think that McElroy's right about that. And I'm going to tell you right now, we're going to do more of this obviously next week. Have you ever had a regular season game that didn't involve Georgia that you were more interested in? Maybe I'm more interested in this than the average person is. But great rivalry that hasn't taken place in years. It's one of those things that I like to think of as sort of a real rivalry because Texas A&M really did try to do everything it could to keep Texas out of the SEC, including, I believe, I can't prove this, but like leaking the story that they were joining the league at SEC Media Days a few years ago as a way of kind of like sort of grinding the gears on all this. A&M hates Texas, and I think Texas probably feels the same way. And now you've got Texas in its first year in the league after having played a cupcake schedule with a need to go on the road and beat its in-state rival to perhaps, secure a spot in the college football playoff. This is as good a regular season game, not involving Georgia, as I have seen in a very, very long time. It will make that cruising around the SEC, courtesy of Royal Caribbean. And before we get ready to wrap up, I've got a note coming for you on Eddie here in a moment. Let's also give a shout out to our friends at Daytona Beach, 23 miles of Atlantic shoreline. Boy, what a great time this fall to get away for a great stay at Daytona Beach. Comfortable temperatures, international airport makes travel easy. I grew up going to Daytona Beach. Love that. You want great restaurants. You want surfing, fishing. There's a lot of golf around there. The LPGA has always had a big kind of stronghold down there in Daytona, all kinds of cool stuff like that. Of course, the super speedways, you start thinking about February, things like that. But the point is, you don't have to wait till then. You can have a great experience right now at Daytona Beach, and you can get great savings here this fall. DaytonaBeach.com/hotel deals for more on that. That's DaytonaBeach.com/hotel deals for more on that today. All right, let's give you a golden shoe here. Our buddy Mad Dawg, always so funny. Last week, the big story after the game was the whining Tennessee fans complaining about the officiating. I feel like we put that down pretty well. But Mad Dawg was laughing about that the other day. He says, these volunteers need help, DawgNation Daily. You see the meme here of the doctor speaking to the crying Tennessee fan, saying, exactly how long have you felt like the refs were against you? The sort of condescending question to the Tennessee fan that you sometimes get in a situation like this. Very, very funny from Mad Dawg. We'll give him a golden shoe for that. And if you'll notice on our graphics, the FreeEddie logo keeps getting bigger. It started off as like a little small thing down the corner. Now it keeps getting bigger and bigger and bigger. What I'm led to believe is that means that Eddie is yearning to be free here right now. I am told we will have an announcement on Eddie and his future next week. Told that's coming next week, so stay tuned for that. Lousy, stinking Gators, Gator hater updater. Obviously, they don't want Eddie back, and they don't like anything about this rivalry right now. 1,475 days. That's how long it's been since Florida has beaten Georgia. That is our Gator hater updater. And, of course, we'll see you back here tomorrow. DawgNation Daily, presented by Merriweather and Tharp. And on video, time now for the R.S. Andrews cool down, and time now for me to pass the baton here. Cody Chaffins does a great job every single day, kind of with some of the video stuff you see on the show, and frequently he's also our on-site producer here too. And for today, he gets a chance to sort of step up and be a part of our R.S. Andrews cool down. So, Cody, let me say thank you to you for doing this for me here today. I know folks are looking forward to talking to you. I'm going to step away, go visit with our friends at Laster Tractor, and then I'll be back in the saddle tomorrow morning. So, Cody, thanks so much. With that, I'll pass it over to you.
All right, appreciate it, BA. Yeah, go get me a tractor and come back.
Sounds good.
I could see, BA on this big green tractor somewhere. All right, so hopping through the comments. Appreciate you guys joining me for the R.S. Andrews cool down. And just taking a look at some of the folks talking here. Cody, have you built up any unique rapport with current players? Well, in my job before this job, I got to kind of have a lot of fun. I was working at Fox 5, you may know or you may not know, here in Atlanta. And part of that, I got to do the commitment ceremonies for a handful of these guys who are still on the team. So I just posted on my Twitter last week, Tate Ratledge's dad, Dean. I was at Tate Ratledge up there in Rome at the Darlington School. I did his commitment ceremony live, and when we were up there, so he commits to Georgia, and he kind of talks about how it was really tough to not be going to Tennessee. And so we walk outside, and his dad, Dean, has got a power tee in the back window of his truck. And so one thing he had to do is he peeled that power tee off. You can see it at Cody Chaffins on Twitter if you want to find it. It's an old video I retweeted this week because Kirby Smart talked about how, that moment, that win for Tate Ratledge over Tennessee was so big, and it is because his family grew up Tennessee fans. So that was one of those cool moments. And because I've gotten to kind of know Malachi Starks is another guy. I did his commitment ceremony live in Jefferson back in the day. And when I did that, I got to know his mom and his dad a little bit, Larry, and then I ended up doing a story his freshman year at his house. So I see his mom, Tisha. I'll say hello to her before. So, and Malachi and I always, we can say what's up when he's out there doing it. I also did Oscar Delp's commitment ceremony, so got to go know him just a little bit. But I always feel like you have those connections with some of those guys, so that's always really cool. Let's see. Texas paid you for my camera yet? So no, didn't hear anything from Texas. And it was the hood part that fell off, and I thought it was okay. And then I went last week, and it's still kind of messed up. So I don't know if I'll send them a note. We'll see if some folks can get it. They're not charging. Nobody's asking me for money, so it's okay. Looking through some of the other comments. What's up? Hey, Steven. Appreciate you watching on Facebook. Full investigation on the Eddie situation. I had some folks ask me about the Eddie because, Brandon's not here right now, right? And so we're trying to figure out what is going on with Eddie, and Brandon is being super quiet about it. And I kind of thought, I really don't know anything about Eddie, and folks are, hey, what's the deal? What's the deal? And I'm thinking, okay. So we had the thing where he showed up at Milton High School, and, we get CJ Wiley commits from Milton High School. That was good. And then Ole Miss, then they had the squirrel on the field. I'm like, there's something up with the squirrel. Is Brandon somehow involved? Is this an Eddie thing? No. And then I thought last week, they're playing a guy named Squirrel for Tennessee. Is this somehow part of the Eddie thing? And it wasn't anything there yet either. So I don't know what to do. I really don't know. Brandon hasn't told us. I haven't seen Eddie. I can't confirm he's doing okay. So really funny there. Farming out the cool down now, so he literally is farming out. He's going down to meet with Lassiter Tractors, who's one of our game day sponsors. You'll see us talk about Lassiter Tractors some days here on DawgNation Daily. We also talk about them on the pregame show with Kaylee and the postgame show with Brandon around each game. So he's meeting with the client today, trying to keep us in business here, keep us so I can go home and buy some diapers. BA lost Eddie. I don't know what the deal is. What game has been your favorite on-field experience in your career? In my career, the coolest moment has to be the blackout game against Auburn. What was that, 08? I was there, and everybody had kind of talked about it, and it was like, are they, aren't they? And then I get there, and they're warming up in the red jerseys. I'm like, okay, so I guess it's not really going to happen. So then I'm standing, this is back when they used to come out on the other side of the stadium. They would run by that big bulldog before they ran out. And so I'm, posted up there ready to get them coming out. And they would used to walk under the stands, and they'd kind of just be standing there for a minute till they tell them it's time to go. Well, this wasn't the case. They all came sprinting out of the locker room and kind of turned that corner really fast and all came sprinting out. And then we knew the blackout was on and the guys go crazy. And, even it took a couple minutes for CBS to start the broadcast. So there was 5 minutes where they were playing Back in Black. That was just, that moment right there was really cool on field. I'm trying to think in the other. So I covered the 2 national championships. I was actually in the press box for those. It's been really fun this year for me to go to the other stadiums around I had never been to Alabama even. I missed out going in the Mikey Henderson year. I had never been to Ole Miss. Obviously never been to Texas, so getting to see some of those environments has been fun. Obviously, other than getting anything thrown at me. Haven't heard anything. Stickties. I feel like have you seen the Peloton video where they all get stuck saying these names out loud? Have you heard anything on the Colby Young front? Have not heard anything. Kirby Smart, last thing he said about it is he's got to wait for the legal process to go through. And I have they're not going to get ahead of what happens legally. And I feel like that stuff just takes forever to get it going. So haven't heard anything on Colby Young. We did hear from Kirby that he was able to use the facilities, able to use the tutoring that UGA offered him still. So that says to me that he is still, compliant to play if he's, gets the charges finally dropped, and that, he's also in shape. So we haven't heard anything official on that. Other folks asking about Eddie. Eddie's on the committee. Maybe that's what the deal is if there's some bird brains on the committee. I don't know if there's any squirrel brains. Matt Rukavina, blackout was 2007. Thank you. I knew I had just started. So I worked for GeorgiaDawgs.com filming games in 05 and 06. Maybe just 06. 05 I started doing softball. 06 season I shot all the games, and then I worked in Toccoa, Georgia in 07, 08. So some of those years all run together for me. Did Florida steal Eddie? Hadn't heard that. Clemson, I've covered a couple Clemson games where they touch the rock. That is a cool moment when they all run down the hill. Although I think the last time we did not have good memories. Last time I was at Clemson. Let's see. I'll hop on DawgNation. My emotional rattlesnake, huh? Let's see. I'm sorry. I'm catching up, UGA Marine, what we're talking about. Our next Marlowe's event. I missed the Marlowe's event, so I wasn't on staff last year when they did the official Marlowe's event. Would love to get. I did my first at the Texas tailgate. Was my first thing doing a DawgNation event with all of you, and that was really cool just to kind of see everybody. Like, we see everybody's names, and then you start to meet people, and that's really fun. So I do love kind of getting out and getting to meet some of these folks because it is a whole new community that I was not a part of before. Am I going to start wearing a flat bill cap? No, I'm a curved cap guy, and I usually wear a hat for every game. You'll see me down there in the black Nike hat. Tate Ratledge actually 5-0 against UT. He didn't lose, right? And he's been here forever. And Georgia's won their last 8 against Tennessee. So he'll forever be able to tell that. He said in his press conference this week he's still got family that won't talk to him, which I love that. That just tells you how important SEC football is. Saying who else? Georgia not released Phillips on a team yet. I'm not sure on that. Put Eddie in some gravy and grits, says Spencer Clark. Eddie would never betray. A lot of Eddie talk. Maybe that was Ole Miss. He was trying to escape at Ole Miss. I love that. William Camacho, the back in black. Yeah, they can see the FreeEddie. So that was the last time Brandon had that picture in his phone. And then all of a sudden, I haven't seen Eddie since. So I used to walk around, you can look in. That's the studio right there. There's no Eddie. So I don't know where Eddie is, what the deal is going on. Thought Cody was going to say the Pierce and Rockmart State Championship game. Jacob O'Neill. I appreciate you mentioning that. Yeah, I got to do that game last year. Pierce County, the Bears, got the big win. The quarterback was insane. That they had a pretty good team last year. And Rockmart thought they were going to get it, but they didn't end up getting the win. So I'm scheduled to do a couple of state championship games again this year. So looking forward to that, being on the sidelines for a few of those. And, I don't do a ton of stuff with Georgia Public Broadcasting, but I do enough. And so I don't get the big games, but that's almost more interesting to me. I will tell you, just trying to prep for, Brandon does the big games, right? He's going to do a 6A team every week, doing the Score Atlanta games. But for me and the Peachtree Sports Network, the ones I get to do are a little bit smaller, but that's almost more fun because when I was prepping for the Pierce County Rockmart game, I'm trying to figure out what's going on. Pierce County, which of course is where Stetson Bennett played, down there in South Georgia, they cover the Pierce County Bears like we cover the Falcons in Atlanta. So I could go through, there's, profiles on certain players. There's tons of articles and stuff. So I could really get up to date on some of these teams because they get covered so well. Meanwhile, I covered a team like Carver in Atlanta because they're right in the middle of the city. They just don't get the same coverage. So it's almost harder to prep for me. So really interesting, how those folks, it's just so important. And I mentioned I worked in Toccoa, Georgia, up in Hartwell. The way they cover Hart County football up there is like they're covering the Atlanta Falcons. So it's really cool when you get outside the city a little bit, and these football teams mean so much to these local communities. Yeah, and I was Senior Dawg asking about seniors will be honored this Saturday, and I heard Kirby Smart on the radio this morning. I was coming in. I didn't realize that they were doing Senior Day this week as opposed to the Georgia Tech game, which is the final game. And Kirby was on 680 The Fan in Atlanta talking on the radio today about Senior Day and what he remembers about his. And, he lost to Georgia Tech on Senior Day, which is one of the reasons that Georgia Tech is such a big game for Kirby Smart, is because he has these lasting negative memories of Georgia Tech. But he also said it was really tough because you're like emotional with your family out on the field and you're taking pictures and you're saying goodbye, and then you got to get hyped up to play a big rivalry game. He said that's really tough. So maybe, I'm guessing, and it also maybe because it's on a Friday, the Georgia Tech game is on a Friday and it's harder for families to travel. I don't know. I don't know why they moved it, but I'm thinking maybe it was just to kind of keep these players, not having to do that and then play Georgia Tech. Jamie Scott asks, what'd you do in Toccoa, WNEG Sports? I live up here. Yes, I did. I was on News Channel 32 at the time, 07, 08, 9, 10, maybe 08, 07, 08, 09. So me and Mac Poss hosted Friday Night Under the Lights up there back when WNEG TV was a thing. WNEG radio is still a thing up there. Still have a good relationship with some of those guys up there. Your favorite Georgia rivalry game? Mine's Tennessee. Silent Chaos is asking on YouTube. Favorite Georgia rivalry game? So we kind of went through this on DawgNation at large. And the ones for me, like Georgia Tech, my uncle went to Georgia Tech. I've got a brother-in-law who went to Georgia Tech. That one is tight. Although, obviously the rivalry is not much of a rivalry right now, but it's one you don't want to lose because literally my uncle, last time it was the Butker kick that beat Georgia, thinking that was the year. My uncle, on the back of his Christmas card he sent everybody, had a picture of Georgia Tech winning in Athens. And that was a part of his Christmas card. So it's just one of those you don't want to lose. The one that gets me the most fired up is probably Florida, and that has to go with just being in college and going down to Jacksonville and losing and having to hear those people chirp. So that one drives me the nuts probably the most. Tennessee's not just as high for me just because, again, we're not as close to some of the Tennessee folks. Falcons couldn't stop DawgNation staff from scoring. Thought that was interesting. Did you guys see this? The Falcons social media staff taking a bye week this week. I thought that was really interesting. I've never seen an NFL team do that, but they said we're logging off for the week. And I can only imagine it's because the comments on so much of the Falcons stuff right now is just really negative. The way that things have gone the last 2 weeks for that Falcons team, it's been really ugly. William Camacho said, perfect day to do Senior Day is Saturday. It's going to be Saturday. The sun's going to be out. It's going to be really pretty pictures. I do think, it's just a little more low-key, and that's a good time to honor those seniors. Eddie is looking for somewhere to get through the winter. Maybe that's it. Maybe he's gone into hibernation. Maybe it's not a hiding thing. Maybe it's just more of a nature thing. It's possible to do a comparison between the committee picks and the BCS picks. I feel like somebody's got those BCS computers somewhere, or somebody can write that code. I feel like that would be a really interesting thing. Greg Hendricks, thanks for chiming in on YouTube. Just to kind of hear what people are saying and just to see how it would line up. Because I think part of it, for a lot of us, at this point, take the people out. Let's just do the computers. If that's going to be the way the people are thinking and they're not, appreciating a strength of schedule or anything, yeah, why not just go back to the computer? Always great to beat Auburn, Bo Cephas. Yeah, that one, again, just recency bias. Auburn just doesn't do it for me. It just doesn't, you're not intimidated. Chris Sale, Cy Young, Randy Hall. Yeah, how about the Braves getting that done? DawgNation Tell-All. Thanks, Third Will. Yeah, we're probably going to bring back some Tell-All. So we did that was Kaylee's, for those who don't know, Kaylee did a whole series of videos with all the DawgNation staff kind of getting their Georgia histories. And some guys, have, like Brandon and Jeff, really extensive UGA history back to when they were babies. That's probably more in line with where I am. My dad went to Georgia, kind of grew up a Georgia fan, so I went to Jim Donnan football camp, all those kind of things. So I would have some fun stories to tell about being a Georgia fan growing up. If you missed any of those are still on like the broadcast page of DawgNation.com. You can find them. You can find them on the YouTube if you search DawgNation Tell All. But it's really fun to hear like Connor's stories about how he became covering Georgia, and is he a Georgia fan or is he not? Because I know a lot of people, and same thing with Mike, who obviously grew up in Michigan. Talks about that. Talks about being in the Army and kind of how he's been all around the SEC, which I think gives him great perspective to add into like our group, right? Because Brandon and Jeff at least has been out and about a little bit and covered, he's been in Alabama, he's been in Augusta, Savannah. So been outside of just Atlanta and Athens. But yeah, really interesting stuff to hear from those guys. So I would suggest you go on, and we're going to try and do some more of those DawgNation Tell-Alls as we get into the off season, and maybe we'll get some more players on there. Would love to do the roundtable again, which we did. Now we could add David into that group. We got to wait on Jake. Jake, we may be waiting until the Super Bowl, right, with the Lions. How cool would it be for Jake Fromm, didn't get his ring at Georgia, to finally get his ring, even if he was a practice squad player up there for the Lions. UGA Marine says, I showed my youngest a Dirty Bird celebration last night. Told him if he scores to break it out, or the Icky Shuffle, the Crazy Legs. Yeah, Billy White Shoes, right? Duluth High School. So he's got one of the great celebrations of all time. The Dirty Bird is one of those things that Jamal Anderson gets all the credit for, but really it was O.J. Santiago, the tight end, who actually did it first, and Jamal will tell you that. So it'll be interesting to see. Falcons they got some tough games coming up. They got to play Ladd. We'll get to see Ladd coming to Atlanta with the Chargers coming up real soon. That's going to be fun to watch. I'm sure he's going to have a huge cheering section. And then we get to see Brock, because they'll play the Raiders too, so that's kind of fun. For the Falcons coming up. Winter's here, snowing in Lexington, Kentucky. It just makes me think, appreciate, this was the time we used to go to Lexington, right? The Georgia-Kentucky games were always November, so I really appreciate Greg Hendricks. Thanks for telling us. I'm glad we're not going to Kentucky right now. Hopefully it'll be a little warmer on Saturday for Georgia, at least under the lights. And then against the Georgia Tech at night, I don't care what it is, it's going to be fun. So we appreciate Greg watching up in Lexington. Got a lot of family up in Kentucky as well. They moved it for family. Okay, so West Georgia Dawg fan, thank you, giving us the answer. They moved Senior Day for the families because it's easier to do Saturday instead of Black Friday, and I think that's probably right. What's the point in doing it if mom and dad can't be there, and if everybody's, it's going to be a hard travel. Although it is a night game, you'd have a few more hours to get there, but why not just do it on a day you can do it? And then those guys, they'll still be emotional as they play Georgia Tech, and Kirby will have them all fired up. Stonehand Santiago, if y'all hate Arian Smith. Philip Jordan Wells, appreciate that. Appreciate you guys all hanging out with me here on the R.S. Andrews cool down. Again, for everybody who missed it, Brandon had to run out to a business meeting, trying to keep the lights on here at the DawgNation headquarters, and so we appreciate him doing that, and happy to fill in. If you enjoy talking to me, you can hear from me Monday nights on The Beat. I'm now with Mike Griffith doing that. And one of the cool parts of On The Beat that we're doing right now is we get to share. So every week I'm shooting video, and I also kind of catch some of these interesting moments that we call boots on the ground. And so sometimes that's like an injury update, like Tate Ratledge for a few weeks there, or Smile Monday. Here's what he looked like this week. So sometimes you don't always get that when you're just reading an article about, hey, Smile's got an injury, and here's him on the sideline in crutches. Here's why he's not playing. So sometimes you get some of that. Sometimes you get, kind of cool celebrations. We saw Lawson Lucky pointing out to his little brother in the stands, so that's kind of a fun moment as well. And then you get some of these cool, me as just a Georgia fan moments. So I will tell you, in the Clemson game, on the sideline that day for the Clemson game was Quincy Carter, who, you just see random Georgia guys floating around the sidelines. Quincy back in Atlanta now coaching high school football. And so he was on the sidelines, and not only was he on the sidelines, at one point in the Clemson game, it was Carson Beck down there with his iPad looking at the plays, Next to him is DJ Shockley, who's, of course, doing the radio. He's always on the sideline. And then Quincy Carter, but they're all like breaking down the plays together. So it's like moments like that I kind of get to catch. And for me, like that's a cool moment. It's never going to make the broadcast. It's not going to make a whole lot of stuff, but we kind of get to do those moments Monday night during On the Beat. So I'd encourage all you guys to kind of watch that and see what's going on. We kind of get to share some of those moments. I'll get some of those, I'm sure, at UMass this week. So I appreciate you guys being with us. We'll see you Monday night. For me, Brandon will be right back here tomorrow. We've got, of course, DawgNation Daily. Tonight, we've got DawgNation at Large. I'll be a part of that with Kaylee and Connor. That's at 7 o'clock. Tomorrow, DawgNation Daily. Then we got Go With The Flow. And when we get Go With The Flow, Dari Pero is going to be on there. He is the head of R.S. Andrews, and he is a huge Dawg fan as well. So we appreciate R.S. Andrews being a part of the R.S. Andrews Cool Down every day. The RS stands for rapid service. That means if your water heater goes out, and this is the time of year you don't want that to happen, you don't want to take a cold shower, they can get it done today. If you go down in the basement and there's water everywhere because that thing has busted, call R.S. Andrews. They'll get there, get it replaced for you, oftentimes in the same day, and they can get it taken care of. So if you're going to do business with some Dawg people, and R.S. Andrews is Dawg people. Thank you to R.S. Andrews. Thank you to Brandon Adams. Thanks to all you guys for being in the comments, and we will see you right back here tomorrow on DawgNation Daily, presented by Merriweather and Tharp.